The narrow lanes of the Strait of Hormuz, lifeline of Iran's economy, have suddenly gone silent. In the span of a single news cycle, Iran's main gateway to the outside world has slammed shut not by Western warships, but by a bold, unexpected move from the way. Flash headlines race across global screens. Way blocks Iranian shipping. Root oil markets in turmoil. Oil prices jump 12% overnight, insurance rates double, and anxious shipping giants scramble for alternatives as panic spreads from the Gulf to trading floors in New York and Shanghai. Inside Tehran, officials go into emergency mode. For decades, Iran relied on this stretch of water to exert its power, fund its regime, and send a signal that it could choke global energy flows at will. That illusion is shattered. The way, once a quieter rival, has used modern ports, new alliances, and coordinated security deployments to box in Iran's tankers and sever its most critical hopes. For ordinary Iranians, this isn't just another headline, it's what fuels their cars, stocks their stores, and pays the salaries that keep families afloat. But the most urgent question echoes far beyond Iran's borders. What happens if this standoff deepens in the next 48 hours? Could the world's economic heart take another blow, or will desperate leaders blink first? As the countdown begins, one thing is clear: what just happened in Hormuz is not a local squabble. It's a turning point with the power to redraw alliances, fuel chaos, and test the world's ability to keep crisis from boiling over. Ignore this moment, and you could miss the fuse that ignites the next global shock. For Tehran, the Strait of Hormuz has always been more than a shipping channel. It's the very heartbeat of the nation's survival and ambition. Nearly every drop of Iranian oil that leaves the country passes through these narrow waters, making the strait both a source of wealth and a powerful lever in global affairs. Decades of sanctions and economic isolation left Iran heavily dependent on this maritime artery. Each supertanker that successfully navigates Hormuz is not just commerce, but a lifeline feeding the government's coffers, funding public services, and propping up a fragile, embattled regime. Politically, the strait has been Tehran's go-to symbol of defiance and leverage. Iranian leaders have long boasted that if threatened, they could choke off energy flows and send oil prices sky-high, wielding Hormuz as both a shield and a sword. State-run media glorifies the strait's strategic value, linking national pride with maritime might and cementing its image as proof of Iran's regional influence. In negotiations, just the threat of disrupting traffic here has forced world powers to take Tehran's warnings seriously. But behind the propaganda, this dependence hides deep vulnerabilities. If Hormuz is blocked even partially, Iran faces not just economic crisis, but a blow to its image of resilience and autonomy. The population, already strained by sanctions and inflation, depends daily on this route to access vital imports and sustain dwindling livelihoods. Without it, the government risks losing both its financial stability and its carefully cultivated aura of control. Simply put, the Strait of Hormuz is the artery that keeps Iran's ambitions alive, and its sudden closure, by the way, is more than just a strategic setback. It's a direct hit to the core of what Tehran believes gives it power, dignity, and a place at the global table. For years, a silent war of ambition has played out along the shores of the Gulf. While international headlines often focused on Iran's assertive moves, the way quietly built up its own arsenal not just of weapons, but of influence, alliances, and world-class infrastructure. Dubai and Abu Dhabi poured billions into modern ports like Jebel Ali and Khalifa, transforming the Emirates into a critical global shipping hub and siphoning cargo traffic away from traditional Iranian routes. This investment wasn't accidental. Behind the scenes, way leaders watched Iran's dependence on the Strait of Hormuz and saw a strategic vulnerability. They formed deep partnerships with Western navies, welcomed U.S. and French military bases, and pioneered joint naval exercises that slowly shifted the balance of maritime security. Each new warship or investment in satellite surveillance was both a deterrent and a quiet challenge to Tehran's dominance. Political rivalry simmered even as trade flourished. The Emirates fostered back-channel relations with Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Egypt, a network of deals, intelligence swaps, and secret summits, all designed to confront growing Iranian clout. The Abraham Accords, establishment of ties with Israel, and active role in regional coalitions marked a clear shift, one that Tehran eyed with growing suspicion and alarm. Tensions were no longer limited to speeches and diplomatic port competition became proxy battles, with each side recruiting allies among smaller Gulf states and jockeying for control over logistics, banking, and technology. From Oman to Bahrain, quiet pressure mounted as nations recalibrated their loyalties in a region defined by shifting sands. In the lead-up to today's crisis, all these threads converged: the way's port-driven rise, advanced naval surveillance, strategic alliances, and willingness to defy old boundaries. The result is a new reality, one where Iran faces a competitor not just at the negotiating table, but at every maritime choke point that once seemed like Tehran's domain alone. The long game of economic and political chess has boiled over into a high-stakes test of strength and resolve visible to the entire world. For much of the last decade, the strategic rivalry between Iran and the UAE has unfolded not just in secret meetings and diplomatic press releases, but in the visible race to reshape the Gulf's maritime landscape. While Iran relied on its old stronghold, the Strait of Hormuz, the UAE moved quickly to diversify its power. At the heart of this campaign was a commitment to world-class port infrastructure. Dubai's Jebel Ali port and Abu Dhabi's Khalifa port became symbols of a vision to dominate regional trade, boasting cutting-edge logistics and security features that made them magnets for global shipping lines. But ports alone weren't enough. The Emiratis invested in advanced naval assets, stealth patrol vessels, fast response coast guard fleets, and deep technical cooperation with Western navies. Joint military exercises with the US, France, and the UK gave the Emirates new tools and tactical knowledge while publicly signaling that the UAE was committed to protecting its sea lanes at almost any cost. This increasingly sophisticated naval presence meant that, where Iran once patrolled Hormuz unchallenged, it now faced an equal one. Backed by cutting-edge technology and international guarantees, the competition wasn't contained to military or commercial realms. Through years of quiet diplomacy, the UAE forged alliances that put Iran on the defensive, deepened security ties with Saudi Arabia, bold normalization with Israel, and fresh economic pacts across Africa and the Indian Ocean. These networks positioned the Emirates not just as a local player but as a central broker in the wider region's affairs. All this investment and alliance building steadily undermined Iran's leverage. International tankers and energy giants, wary of political risk, found UAE ports safer and more reliable, draining revenue from Iranian routes. Rumors of secret Emirati initiatives, blockchain shipping records, satellite surveillance sharing, and behind-the-scenes talks to guard key choke points added new pressure. The result, by the time the current standoff began, the UAE had quietly built a net of influence and capability around Iran, ready to challenge its dominance whenever the moment arrived. Now that moment is here, and the groundwork laid over years has left Tehran more isolated than ever. The game changed overnight. As international cargo ships queued at the Strait's eastern entrance, a series of urgent broadcasts erupted from UAE ports. Access routes for Iranian-flagged vessels were suspended until further notice. Within hours, the world's shipping trackers began to paint an extraordinary picture: tankers scheduled for Bandar Abbas or Iranian oil terminals were rerouted, some forced into holding patterns just outside of UAE-controlled waters. But this was far more than a bureaucratic slowdown. Emirati naval forces, already on heightened alert, swiftly moved to assert control over key maritime lanes. Advanced patrol boats established a visible presence along high-traffic choke points, and joint exercises with Western allies were escalated from drills to real-time deployments. Radar signatures captured on global marine networks told the story. Emirati and allied warships maneuvered to form a security cordon, placing inspection zones along the most critical transit arteries. The UAE simultaneously activated strategic agreements with international shipping consortia, activating insurance and risk clauses that effectively barred Iran-linked cargoes from using not only Emirati harbors but also affiliated regional ports. This network effect triggered a chain reaction. Ports in Bahrain, Oman, and Saudi Arabia quietly followed suit, all but isolating Iranian traffic at a regional level. Shipping companies scrambled to adjust, knowing that even indirect association with Tehran now posed operational or financial peril. Crucially, this rapid escalation was not just the result of bureaucracy or fleeting anger. Intelligence sources revealed that the UAE coordinated its moves with Western security services, sharing data on suspected smuggling operations and monitoring attempts to circumvent the blockade via shadowy flag changes or shell companies' eyes. In the sky from satellites, 2 drones amplified pressure, making it almost impossible for Iranian vessels to slip through unnoticed. Inside Iran, alarm bells rang. Officials condemned the illegal closure and vowed to respond, but every public threat was paired with behind-the-scenes requests for mediation and face-saving off-ramps. For global observers, one message was unmistakable: the UAE's tactical deployment, supported by its network of alliances, had boxed in Iran's maritime options in record time. This was more than a spat; it was an orchestrated show of power that rewrote the rules of the Persian Gulf overnight. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively choked by UAE-led moves, Tehran scrambled to salvage its shrinking influence. Immediate attempts focused on reinvigorating black market networks. Seasoned smugglers plotted alternative sea routes, and shadowy middlemen in Oman and Pakistan were enlisted to disguise Iranian oil under foreign flags. Yet the web of satellite surveillance and port cooperation among Gulf Arab states made evasion far riskier. Insurers refused coverage for suspect cargo, and most major shippers wanted no part in cargo runs that could see assets seized or banned. Faced with maritime walls on every side, Iran's Revolutionary Guard tried rerouting energy flows to overland alternatives, touting pipelines through Iraq or into Central Asia. But infrastructure gaps, geopolitical rivalries, and the sheer scale of what was lost turned these plans into little more than wishful thinking. Tankers that Once traced a predictable arc out of Bandar Abbas now sat idle, rumors swirling of crews unpaid and shipments stalled indefinitely. On the diplomatic front, Tehran launched a flurry of desperate back-channel efforts. Messages went out to European capitals and regional rivals, offering everything from economic cooperation to temporary de-escalation. Yet with oil markets already rocked by shockwaves and shipping giants invested in Emirati stability, few were eager to risk their positions by openly aiding Iran. Multiple attempts at mediation stalled, sending Iranian negotiators home with little more than new promises to consider future talks. Inside the regime, frustration and panic grew. Elite commanders traded blame, wondering how a regional rival could so quickly dismantle years of maritime leverage. Some criticized government arrogance, while others whispered about moles or betrayal among Gulf states. Social media channels normally filled with state propaganda saw a rare surge in open worry and sharp-edged satire. In offices overlooking the now silent strait, officials switched from threat to damage control, aware that every failed gambit further weakened Tehran's image at home and abroad. In the end, every path out was met by another wall, leaving Iran trapped not just by blockades and patrols, but by the rapid collapse of its strategic options in plain view of the world. The ripple effects of the Hormuz shutdown hit Iranian society with stunning speed and force. Overnight, oil prices spiked to levels unseen in years, sparking panic among both traders and ordinary families. Gas stations in Tehran and coastal cities saw long, tense lines as rumors swirled of looming rationing. Within a week, local markets reported empty shelves for basic goods like flour, rice, and cooking oil supplies delayed or caught up in the maritime chaos rippling outward from the strait. Businesses that depended on imports and exports faced paralyzing uncertainty. Trucking firms sat idle, awaiting shipments that never arrived. Factory managers debated furloughs as inventories emptied, and small shop owners watched their costs soar while foot traffic shrank. In ports bordering the way, stories filtered in of entire shipments being denied entry or redirected at sea, leaving merchants with losses they could ill afford. Even in typically insulated sectors, layoffs began as supply chains seized up and revenue dried. From the Emirati side, boom turned to caution. Some traders in Dubai and Abu Dhabi welcomed the short-term windfall of sky-high shipping rates, but soon realized the risk. The entire region's reputation for reliability as a global logistics hub was under threat. Insurance costs ballooned and some freight contracts collapsed overnight, forcing quick recalculations of what commerce would look like in a Gulf suddenly riven by rivalry and blockade. Amid the economic numbers, personal stories mounted. Iranian parents worried about buying school supplies for the coming term. Truck drivers, whose livelihoods depended on maritime cargo, spent their days at roadside tea stands swapping rumors and grim jokes about when or if normal schedules would return. In Emirati trading houses, seasoned logistics managers reflected soberly that all sides now faced tough choices: adapt quickly or be swept up in a crisis that was spiraling beyond anyone's control. In both nations, a gnawing anxiety took hold. How many more weeks or even days could this last before painful sacrifices became permanent realities? The immediate fallout, both economic and human, made it clear that the cost of this confrontation would haunt everyday lives far beyond the strait itself. The clock is ticking louder than ever across the Gulf, and every stakeholder knows it. In just days, OPEC ministers are set to gather for an emergency summit with oil-dependent nations pleading for clear action to stabilize prices. The world's analysts will be watching to see if the group holds together or fractures under competing demands, especially as some members quietly celebrate Iran's struggles, while others fear a domino effect that could destabilize markets from Shanghai to Sao Paulo. If the summit ends in deadlock, panic could push oil prices to heights unseen in a decade and rob central banks of the tools needed to protect vulnerable economies. There are also hard deadlines racing closer for the ships caught in limbo. Insurance policies covering vessels in the Gulf are set to expire within 48 hours. For every day that tankers sit idle awaiting risk sign-offs or last-minute political fixes, millions in revenue evaporate, and pressure mounts on both owners and crews. Some shipping CEOs have warned that, unless a corridor is negotiated soon, they will pull fleets permanently, creating a logistical hole that ripples through every rung of global supply chains. Diplomatic channels, once slow and measured, now hum with urgent appeals and back-channel threats. The way, emboldened by regional and Western support, weighs whether to harden its stance or offer Iran a tenuous path to de-escalation. Calls to restraint echo from European capitals and Washington, but hawks on both sides warn that hesitation could be read as weakness, tempting riskier moves or even outright provocations. Unconfirmed reports already suggest military mobilization on Iran's side and increased Emirati and allied patrols throughout Hormuz. At home, leaders face mounting internal pressure. Iranian hardliners shout for bold retaliation, hinting at missile tests, cyber attacks, or a dramatic move to disrupt outbound shipping for everyone. In the way, cautious technocrats worry that military escalation could undo years of investment and plunge the Gulf into chaos, putting not just Iran but the entire region at risk. Every hour without resolution brings the threat of sudden conflict, yet paradoxically, the same time window offers a narrow shot at negotiation before the situation spins out of control. As expiration dates, ministerial meetings, and military deployments align. The next 48 hours could mark either the turning point for a historic breakthrough or the spark that ignites the Gulf's most dangerous crisis in a generation. Missing these moments means missing the outcome that could define the entire region's future. What began as a regional showdown is swiftly evolving into a cascade of consequences touching nearly every corner of the globe. As the Hormuz standoff deepens, Gulf Arab states have moved beyond rivalry to forge unprecedented security cooperation, shared intelligence, joint naval patrols, and contingency plans that would have seemed impossible just years ago. This realignment not only isolates Iran further, but boosts the Emirates' profile as a linchpin in the security architecture of the Middle East. Meanwhile, Israel is moving quietly but decisively. Under the surface, intelligence services have ramped up surveillance and discreet support for anti-Iran operations. Cyber units position themselves for possible proxy skirmishes, and Israeli diplomats leverage the crisis to strengthen ties with Gulf partners and press for broader regional coordination against Tehran. The impact is not limited to statecraft and secret deals. Energy-hungry economies across Asia, from South Korea to India, are feeling the squeeze of volatile oil prices and rerouted shipments. What was once a stable, predictable flow of resources now looks precarious. For smaller, developing nations already hampered by inflation or currency risk, each spike in transport cost triggers economic pain, potentially plunging millions into new waves of poverty or political unrest. Even African oil-exporting states, far from the Gulf, face new pressures. Some receive windfall gains from higher prices, while others scramble as trade deals and investment flows shift overnight. International markets shudder as insurance premiums reshape which routes are viable and which must be abandoned. In this web of global interdependence, a single move in the Strait of Hormuz sets off a sequence of reactions across continents. The aftershocks remind every government, business, and family that in today's world, no crisis remains local for long and that the next domino could fall anywhere at any time. Looking ahead, decision makers and analysts agree on only one thing: there are no safe outcomes left on the table. The potential for outright escalation is real and rising. Iranian hardliners could push for risky maneuvers, attempting to disrupt way-bound shipping, launching cyber attacks on Gulf ports, or ramping up proxy activity in neighboring states. Each of these options is fraught with danger, and even limited success might trigger military responses that draw in global powers, making the Gulf a flashpoint for wider conflict. Yet the prospects for diplomacy appear just as fraught. While some international actors urge a negotiated settlement, the lack of trust is palpable. The way, having scored a dramatic strategic gain, has little incentive to blink first, while Iran, cornered and exposed, fears that any appearance of weakness will invite further isolation and embolden internal dissent. Previous attempts at back-channel talks have fizzled, sidetracked by mutual suspicion and the relentless momentum of unfolding events. Even outside mediators wrestle with gridlock, struggling to frame terms that both sides view as acceptable. There's also the unsettling risk of unmanaged collapse. With shipping paralyzed, critical supplies shrinking, and economic shock building, social unrest could break out in both Iran and, in a different way, the Emirates. Civilian pressure might force one or both governments toward rash decisions, especially as rumors of food and fuel shortages take hold in influential business interests. Demand stability at any cost. Each day without resolution is a day closer to some new crisis point, one that might come from an unpredictable trigger: a stray missile, a cyber attack that goes too far, a diplomatic gaffe, or a misread military signal. The greatest uncertainty is not which scenario will win out, but how much damage will occur in the race to find out. As the region stands on the brink, the rest of the world holds its breath, knowing that any miscalculation could redraw the map of power for a generation. The only certainty is that the danger isn't over, and what happens next is impossible to predict. The closure of Iran's Strait of Hormuz route marks a turning point with consequences the world can't afford to ignore. Every day brings new risks, rising costs, and the real possibility of a crisis erupting beyond control. As this story keeps evolving, staying informed could make all the difference. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an urgent update, because in a landscape this volatile, the next move could change everything for nations, markets, and lives everywhere. The drama is just beginning. Don't miss what happens next.